Hello and welcome to a book buzz from the Denver Public Library. My colleague and I here today are going to share 31 books with you, some of which have already been published, some of which are going to be published in the near future. And we have genres ranging from mystery to romance to nonfiction. So we hope you'll find something you like. All right, let's do some introductions. Dodie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you, Katie. I am Dodie Onis. I'm an adult services librarian at Denver Public Library's Central Branch downtown off of Broadway and Civic Park.
And I'm Katie MacKendrick. I'm a librarian at the Hadley Branch Library, which, if you don't know, is in the southwest part of Denver, right on Jewel and Federal. I like to tell people we are right across from the McDonald's. All right, so we did split up the books. So this first one is Dodie's.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Eugene Linden, the author of this book, he started exploring climate change in 1988 with an article in Time magazine. And this is the culmination of a lot of his research over those years on what we are looking at when it comes to climate change and how it's going to affect us in the future. Starting with the 1980s, Linden tells the story of climate change decade by decade, the reality of climate change itself, and how it impacts business and finance, which, as we know, sometimes you have to get people in the pocket to get them to pay attention. So we need to get ahead of this catastrophe before it happens. And Linden lays out some ideas on how we can affect that change. You might want to pair this with Is Science Enough? 40 Critical Questions About Climate Justice from Aviva Chomsky. That's also coming out April 1st. And Speed and Scale, An Action Plan for Solving Our Climate Crisis by John Doerr.
Very prescient.
Yeah. Next up is The Candy House from Jennifer Egan. And, you know, Jennifer Egan fans are legion. And those that have loved her previous titles will really dig into this. You'll re-meet some of the characters from her award-winning The Goon Squad. Now it's 2010 and Bix Booten is desperate for a new idea. So he comes up with a concept for externalizing memory. So any memory you've ever had, you can externalize and save it so that you can revisit it at any point that you want. This pokes fun at the new digital culture. It also begs the question, what would happen if you truly could relive those memories again? For other titles where memories are revisited, check out Tosakazu Kawaguchi's Before the Coffee Gets Cold and the titular short story of T.C. Boyle's 2017 short story collection, The Relive Box.
You know, Dodie, I don't know if I'd want to relive all of my memories, especially the bad ones, but I don't know. Even the good ones, I'm okay just keeping in my head, I think.
Yeah, high school, I never have to remember again. Yeah.
Yikes.
When I picked Atomic Anna for this book buzz a few months ago, I had no idea what the state of the world would be. And now Chernobyl is once again on everybody's lips, but in a different context. It's 1986 and nuclear scientist Anna, I lost her last name, Anna Burkova, is sleeping when the Chernobyl reactor disaster begins to happen. All of a sudden, fast forward, she opens her eyes and it's 1992, and she's there just in time to hear her dying daughter's last wish, and that is to go back into the past and change things so that Chernobyl doesn't happen and that she doesn't die. This is really a classic kind of time travel story where one theme and family pull the story together. It's interesting that in her 80s, when we meet Raisha later on in the book, she is also trying to find her biological grandmother. So there's a lot of ties to the back, to the future and to the past. Pair this up maybe with The Blind Light by Stuart Evers, which presents a British viewpoint on the specter of a nuclear disaster, or The Chaos Function by Jack Skillingstead, which examines the what ifs of tampering with time to save a loved one.
Yeah, it is funny because, well, it's not funny, but we did pick these books, long before anything happened with between Russia and Ukraine. And so Dodie said, wow, I'm really glad we kept this on the list. It's very relevant. All right. So this one, Portrait of a Thief, is a debut novel. We've got a few of those in here. And I like it because it is a heist novel. And I love, all things heist, Italian Job, any of those kind of Jason Statham movies where he goes in, gets something, gets out. But this kind of turns it on its head a little bit because it's about reclaiming art that has been kind of taken from its native land. So this follows Will Chen, who's an art student at Harvard. And so he sort of feels this impulse, kind of like I said, to get in, take that art back, that Chinese art that had been sort of taken from China and put in this museum. So he pilfers, I'll say, an item from this museum. And the next day he gets a note that said, "Nice work. Come join me," basically. So he learns that the note is from business mogul Wan Yuling, and she asks him to recruit a team to, again, kind of go about reclaiming this art from much, much bigger museums on a pretty grand scale. So Will assembles 5 Chinese Americans, all of whom are in their early 20s and all of whom perform a pretty specific function. They have a getaway driver, they've got the muscle, they've got the hacker. And so they kind of go about this journey of reclaiming this art, but not everything goes according to plan. And I think what Lee does a good job of doing, and what she's strongest at, is sort of this meditation on what it means to be part of a diaspora. And there's some really poignant moments of all of these folks in Will's crew kind of bonding over their shared heritage, and kind of the Chinese American culture. So I think this would be good for fans of Dara Horn's The World to Come, or Jane Peck's The Verifiers, which we highlighted in our Winter of Reading Book Buzz.
And Katie, I want to throw in too that book comes from Tiny Reparations Press, which is a Penguin imprint, but it was started by Phoebe Robinson, who a lot of people might know as the podcast Two Dope Queens. So
yes,
that's another great reason to pick this one up and give it a try.
Definitely. All right, this next one is a nonfiction novel, not novel, it's a nonfiction book. And there's a couple of names in here that you might not know. Jackie Moms Mabley and Belle Barth. So those were both unfamiliar to me before I picked this up. But Levy, who is a film critic and a biographer, covers these women's important achievements in his latest book, which kind of chronicles the history of women's stand-up from the 1940s to the 1970s, which is not a great time to be a woman trying to break into the comedy scene. He has a quote about how, the very male-dominated industry of stand-up kind of forced these women who wanted to tell jokes to, quote, face a brick wall. So his work is about how these women kicked down these walls and kind of paved the way for other comedians like Phyllis Diller, Elaine May, Joan Rivers to become household names. So if you didn't know, Mabley is a Black vaudeville performer who's famous for speaking very candidly about race and sex, again, during a time when neither of those things were spoken about very much. And then we have Barth, who is a Jewish comedian who was very raunchy and, again, kind of scandalizing. And so I think if you would like to kind of fill in gaps in your sense of, not only entertainment history, but the history of comedy, this one's a great one to pick up. And Dodie later will talk about someone who kind of was influenced by these women as well. And if you'd like to check out books for further reading on the subject, in our catalog, we have We Killed: The Rise of Women in American Comedy by Yael Cohen, or Funny Ladies: The Women Who Make Us Laugh by Stephen M. Silberman. All right, on to a more somber topic. So Elizabeth Alexander is a poet and memoirist, and 2 years ago, she wrote an article in the New Yorker, and it's kind of a reflective essay on how Black hope and creativity and that sense of community sort of works to reconcile generational trauma and racial prejudice and some of the racial violence that's been happening. So this is kind of an expanded version of that essay. And it's an artful and dynamic critique of the difficult experiences of Black youth who have come of age, especially those who have come of age in the last 25 years, kind of in the wake of police brutality, COVID-19, the backlash against critical race theory, and her kind of analysis really spans decades. She talks about kind of the civil rights movement and some of the poetry and art that came out of that, but also issues in the present day, which kind of just goes to show racism is not gone. We are not in a post-racial society. A lot of issues that were prevalent in the 60s are still prevalent today. And I wrote down a quote from Kirkus Review. When they reviewed this book, they noted, at its core, this is a powerful treatise on the humanity of Black Americans and how it is denied, how generations of people have persisted despite that fact, and how it continues to be one of the most pressing issues we face as a nation. So if you'd like to pair this with another book, I would highly suggest Tracy Michelle Lewis Jiggett's Black Joy, which again is a book that we highlighted in our Winter of Reading Book Buzz. All right, on to you, Dodie.
Thank you. This next book from Susan Cain is titled Bittersweet, How Sorrow and Longing Make Us Whole. And you may be familiar with Cain from her 2012 book, Quiet, The Secret Strength of Introverts. I'm one of those introverted extroverts, I think, and I'm so not quiet. So I didn't read that one, but this one I might read because it does suggest that there is value in allowing yourself to be sad and allowing yourself to accept those feelings of being melancholy. There is research, firsthand accounts, biographical anecdotes included in this book about being willing to accept your sorrow and kind of live through it. I know this has been a really tough 2 years or so for a lot of people. So if you're having a little bit of trouble moving into the new world that we live in, you might want to pick up Susan Cain's Bittersweet. You can pair this with Daniel Pink's latest, The Power of Regret, How Looking Backwards Moves Us Forward. These books echo a lot of the same sentiment on that. And then Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know by Adam Grant. Okay, the next book is a nonfiction offering, another nonfiction offering. And I was just fascinated when I saw this coming out from Tuttle, The Widow, the Priest, and the Octopus Hunter. American journalist Amy Chavez moved to the tiny island of Shiraishi, population 430 in Japan, and she rented a house from an elderly woman named Iko, and the widow left most of her belongings in the house, leaving Amy to live alongside of somebody else's life in objects. Why was there a portrait of Emperor Hirohito on the family altar? What was that spirit tablet from her late husband doing there? Why was there a tombstone with the name of a daughter that the widow had never mentioned? So these are some of the mysterious things that Amy plumbs into while she's staying here. She talks about the acceptance of the community that was gradual and then very close and loving. She is now a 25-year resident of Japan, and she's a tourist advisor. And I think if you're planning a trip to Japan, you might want to take a look at The Widow, the Priest, and the Octopus Hunter. Or if you just want to armchair travel there, do that as well. If you want to take another dive into rural life in Japan, you can pick up Haruki Murakami's Killing Kamatore, or travel to Ireland through Tom Phelan's We Were Rich and We Didn't Know It, a memoir of my Irish boyhood.
armchair travel is probably my favorite way to travel these days, but in all seriousness, I would love to get to Japan sometime.
Yeah, a $24 book is much cheaper than a $500 round trip, right?
Very true. Very true.
I'm really excited for The Sign for Home from Blair Fell. Arlo, our protagonist in this book, is deaf and blind and has realized that he probably let the one go. And he doesn't want to give up on that. So he decides to find the woman that got away. He met her at a boarding school for the deaf, and he thought her hands were beautiful the way that she signed. And he actually kind of fell in love with her signing before he fell in love with her. He takes off with his gay interpreter on a mission to find her. And along the line, he runs into several hearing characters who have abysmal American Sign Language skills. So sort of like talking to somebody that doesn't use idioms the correct way. He's often very stunned by this, but he does keep in pursuit of his lost love. Fell is an actor, screenwriter, and a playwright. So you'll find a little bit of element of that kind of storytelling in this book. He also is an ASL interpreter for the deaf. For other titles featuring deaf or hard of hearing characters, look at True Biz by Sarah Novick. That's also brand new. And in 2021, Yara Shahori published Aquarium. It's translated from the Hebrew, and that is about two sisters, both deaf, brought up in sort of a cult-like environment by their deaf parents. So no rom-com element there.
All right.
Over to you, Katie.
Yes, so I've got for you The Woman in the Woods and Other North American Stories. This is a graphic anthology, and all of the stories in it are written by Native American and First Nations authors, all of whom are from 8 different tribes. And you'll find this book cataloged as YA in our collection, but we included it because, well, we thought anybody would be able to enjoy the stories. And it's worth noting this is the 5th volume in the Cautionary Fables and Fairy Tale series, which works to highlight folk tales from around the world. And I think this is a pretty diverse collection of comics. All of the characters range in skin tones, ages, genders, etc. And the stories are also all kind of unique. If you're looking for something mysterious, if you're looking for something educational, if you're looking for something funny, I think there's something for everyone in here. And the graphic format is pretty easily digestible. So this would be great for somebody who's not only, maybe looking to learn a little bit more about Indigenous culture and Indigenous folktales, but I also think that Indigenous readers will be able to kind of see themselves in these stories as well, in these familiar tales. So these are great to either read on your own or, maybe share them with friends, just get them out there somehow. If you're looking for more, another graphic collection with a similar kind of subject matter, I would suggest Trickster Native American Tales, edited by Matt Dembicki. This is also cataloged as YA, but again, I think anybody can kind of enjoy that.
Yeah, I wanted to throw a homegirl shout out to Fulcrum Publishing from Golden, Colorado for Trickster.
Oh yeah, they are based in Golden, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. All right, so moving on to another romance. This is by Claire Kahn, who has written a lot of YA romance. And this is her first adult romantic novel, but all of her novels include very kind of compelling Black asexual protagonists, and Joy is no exception. So Joy loves to make puns. She loves documenting her fashion choices on Instagram, but she also has a pretty huge secret crush on Malcolm, who is her not only her college best friend, but also her boss. So their lives are pretty intertwined, but she hasn't yet told him how she feels. So Malcolm comes into her office one day and says, "Joy, I've met the love of my life. Her name is Summer, and I'm going to take her on a trip so I can tell her how I feel. And of course, Joy is devastated, but supportive. And so Malcolm is very excited to go on this trip until he finds out that Summer has brought along, or plans to bring along, her ex-boyfriend, Fox. And so Malcolm pleads with Joy to come on this trip so she can kind of distract Fox while Malcolm goes and confesses his love to Summer. And again, since she has these kind of secret feelings for Malcolm, Joy reluctantly agrees. And so the four of them go on a, what I can imagine, very awkward trip together. And so Joy and Fox meet, and there's kind of this trope in romance where the sunshiny gal gets with the very grumpy kind of stoic guy. And this is definitely the dynamic at play here. Fox is, she describes him as grumpy several times, but it's pretty clear otherwise that he's also kind of grumpy, even if she hadn't said that. So Fox proposes that, to kind of get Malcolm and Summer off their backs, and maybe even to distract them a little, he proposes that he and Joy, Fox and Joy, get together in a fake relationship. But of course, the thing with fake relationships is they often turn very real feelings come up. So you'll have to read the book to find out what happens. And I think that Kahn's story really serves to both educate and delight, because readers will learn about what it's like to date as someone who is asexual. Excuse me. And then they'll also be delighted by how, joyful Joy is. I would say if you're looking for more LGBTQ plus diverse romance novels, I would grab Devon and Chris Plan a Wedding by Chensia C. Higgins. It has kind of a very similar flavor and very similar tropes as well. All right, on to you, Dodie.
Thank you. This next title covers a period in historical fiction that is not covered very much, and that is the 19th century Puerto Rican plantations. Most of the time when we talk about plantations, everybody immediately thinks of the US South, and the plantations were very much worked by enslaved people in the 19th century. This book from Dalma Llanos Figueroa follows Pola, a woman who is stolen and put onto a plantation basically to be a breeder. And she's with a group of other women that as soon as their babies are born, they're basically taken away from them. And they once again are bred to produce more children. And this is the cycle of vicious violence and sexual abuse that she endures for many years until she is lost to another plantation owner as part of a gambling debt. So she gets moved to a different plantation, and this is not a plantation that has breeders. This is where she is enslaved, but by a more compassionate owner. And she begins to start to feel as if there is a reason to be hopeful in life. There's many ups and downs. She becomes friends with another enslaved man who is quite literate, and she begins to see that there is hope for her in that aspect as well. And she meets an abandoned child that she tries to nurture. And again, her hopes are dashed, over and over. But ultimately, she finds that she can endure and try to see the world in a more positive way for somebody that's been through so many devastating things. If you're looking at other titles that look at the whole enslavement issue, Breaking the Mafia Chain by Annie Domingo and A More Perfect Union by Tammy Huff. And that latter title ties in the Great Irish Potato Famine and how Irish were enslaved during that time period as well.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say that's definitely a period that I need to be more educated on. So I'll be picking that one up.
Yeah, I recommend it highly. This next one's yours, Katie.
It is. This is by Lisa Xiao-Chen, and this is her debut novel. She is also a poet, like a couple of our other authors. She has a poetry collection called Mouth, but this is her first literary fiction novel. And in it, she explores the themes of family ties, cultural difference, and exactly what it means to be productive. So this focuses on an Asian American woman, Alice, who is caring for her white stepfather, who is only referred to as the father. And the father, sadly, is suffering from dementia, and he is a recovering alcoholic as well. He's kind of deteriorating from that hard drinking. And so he's really prone to these angry, sort of destructive bouts of emotion where he doesn't really know where he is or who he is or what's going on. So to kind of cope with this, Alice throws herself into studying performance artist Te-Ching Hsieh, who again in the book is referred to as the artist. And he's particularly kind of mystifying because he sort of completes these different performance pieces, none of which totally culminate into anything. And then he sort of removes himself from the public eye. And so the story kind of alternates between the 1980s when this disappearance happened and then the 2010s when the father also is sort of retreating into himself. So there's a lot of similarities between the two journeys, such that Alice can kind of conflate what the two men are going through. And it ends up being a really kind of thoughtful reflection on the themes I mentioned before, but also just on time and the meaning of a life well lived. And this got a starred review from Publishers Weekly, who called it masterly and memorable. So if you've read kind of similarly haunting and lyrical books like On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong or Outline by Rachel Cusk, and you're looking for something similar, I would pick this one up.
Now onto the book that Katie mentioned earlier when we were talking about funny women in history. This is Hello, Molly from Molly Shannon. Many of you may be familiar with her from her Saturday Night Live work. And for such a funny person, her life started somewhat tragically. When she was just 4, her mother and sister died in a car accident that her father was at the wheel of. And she discovered early on, perhaps because of this tragedy, that she really loved making people laugh. So she did the work on becoming the comedian that she is today and performer that she is today. While she was attending NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, she broke into stand-up comedy. She spends several chapters talking about her experience with Saturday Night Live. There's a lot of name dropping and really fun anecdotes in here. And if you really love her work and you've loved her movies, you'll want to dive into this one. You'll feel like you're going to get to know her as a friend. If you want to look at some of Molly's influences, other than the book we mentioned earlier, check out In on the Joke, the original Queens of stand-up comedy. Oh, that was the one that we highlighted earlier. Sorry about that. Her Notes from the Bathroom line, Humor, Art, and Low-Grade Panic from 150 of the Funniest Women in Comedy, edited by Amy Solomon. Our next title, there's really nothing funny about this. If you're not old enough to remember Love Canal, you need to pick this up and find out about this period of history in our country's life, our environmental life, I think you could say. Between 1941 and 1952, Hook Chemical buried drums filled with 20,000 tons of toxic waste in an abandoned canal along the river in Niagara Falls, New York. So when most people think of Niagara Falls, they think of the beautiful picture postcard. Don't think that. Think black ooze coming through your cement walls. Think about strange rashes. Think about children being born with deformities. This was the result of all the toxic waste that was dumped in Love Canal. By the 1970s, citizens were being poisoned. It was clear that this was not a safe place to live. The author tells the tragic story of Love Canal and how the oversight of of public officials in the town and of any environmental agencies totally failed this community. In fact, a deal was brokered between the chemical company and the town to build an elementary school on the site of a chemical dump, because they could buy the parcel for $1. So this is the worst of the worst of government and corporation coming together to cover up waste, bad waste. The 1980 Superfund Act did help to clean up some of these areas, but the cleanup takes a very, very long time and is still occurring in many of these areas. For more on corporate greed and environmental damage, pick up There Are No Accidents, The Deadly Rise of Injury and Disaster, Who Profits and Who Pays the Price by Jesse Singer.
Wow. Well, nothing goes with toxic waste like a light paranormal rom-com, right? So that is the genre of our next book. Go hex yourself. So it begins with Reggie Johnson, who decidedly non-magical being, does not believe in magic at all. And it focuses on her answering a job advertisement for what she thinks is Spellcraft, the company that makes her favorite card game. And she believes that she is answering an ad to be an executive assistant, when in fact, she's answering an ad from Drusilla Drew Magnus, a 2,000-year-old witch who needs a human familiar to perform her magic. And to make matters worse, within this very strange, often alienating magical world is Drew's nephew, Ben, who is the annoyingly dour, but of course very handsome warlock who always seems to be around and who definitely does not think a non-magical being should be Drew's familiar. But, you know, despite Ben's best efforts and some of the weird things she witnesses in this world, Reggie sort of relishes the stability of her new job. She also denies a lot of the magical elements that are happening for a very long time, because the paycheck is huge. She gets $25,000 a month. So I would also put up with a lot for $25,000 a month. But you know, ultimately, Drew is cursed into a coma, and of course, Reggie has to team up with Ben to figure out how to break the curse and sort of get her out of this. So obviously, there's romance in it. You can probably guess between whom from my description. And so there's some romantic elements throughout, but the actual culmination takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it. This is great for fans of other fun paranormal romance like The X-Hex by Aaron Sterling and Payback's a Witch by Alana Harper. All right, switching genres once again. You may know Janelle Monáe as a musician or you know, even an artist or an actor or an activist. And so she kind of enters the realm of the written word with this collection of short stories, which are based on her album Dirty Computer, which also spawned a short film. And you definitely don't need to be familiar with Dirty Computer, but if you are, she makes sure to kind of pepper a lot of different references throughout the stories, which will definitely delight fans. So each of these 5 short stories are written with a different co-author, and all of them are set in this totalitarian state where thoughts are monitored, memory is wiped clean, if it's at all objectionable. And those with sort of these persistent, impure thoughts are deemed dirty computers, and they have to, the government has to kind of take more serious action to deal with them. So these stories do a great job of exploring themes of collective resistance, sort of the corruption and contradictions of bureaucracy and the importance of community. And for me, one of the standout entries is actually the title entry, which happens to be the longest and the first story. It was co-written with Alea Dawn Johnson. So it probably takes up about 25, maybe a little more % of the book, but it's definitely worth reading. This is another starred review from Publishers Weekly, and they call it a moving, triumphant collection and a knockout. So if this piques your interest in sci-fi, Afrofuturism, cyberpunk, any of those themes, I would also recommend N.K. Jemison's short story collection, How Long Till Black Future Month, or Nnedi Okorafor's sci-fi novel, Remote Control. All right. So this
cover
is, yeah, it's so beautiful. And I'm a sucker for family dramas set in Italy. So this was a definite, automatic yes for me. This is by Adriana Trigiani, who has written quite a few books about family sagas that span multiple generations and continents, and this one is no exception. So in this, we start out in the Italian coastal town of Viareggio, where 81-year-old Matilda Cabrelli Roffo is meeting with her 25-year-old granddaughter, Anina. And Anina is getting married. And so Matilda says, since you're going to get married and go off into the world, you can pick any item from my jewelry box. But of course, Anina picks out the one item that Matilda does not want her to pick, the one that she buried in the bottom of her jewelry box. It's an unusual jewel-encrusted watch with sort of a turned around face. And so Anina kind of presses her on it and asks about the history, because she wants to know more about her family history. And so Matilda finally reveals what has up until that point been a secret, which is her mother's first marriage to a Scottish sea captain, John Lowry McVickers. So Trigiani takes her readers on a pretty long journey. Again, I said it spans multiple generations and continents. So we start in the 20s, the 1920s, and go to the 30s, as Domenica is forced to leave her hometown after recommending birth control to a patient. We go to France, where she meets her first husband, and then we go back to Viareggio. So I won't give away any of the sort of twists or secrets that are revealed, but the chapters alternate between past and present. And Anina is definitely shocked by what her grandmother tells her. And ultimately, it sort of reshapes her perception of sort of the concept of love, family values, and sacrifice. This has, Trigiani is typical in her lush descriptions and almost flowery, sort of flowy language. So if you've enjoyed her other works, I would definitely pick this one up. Or if you've enjoyed other family sagas, such as Anne Patchett's The Dutch House or Catherine Banner's The House at the Edge of Night, you would also enjoy this one. All right, we are definitely jumping genres today. This one is an urban fantasy written by Holly Black, who again is a YA author. Typically, this is her adult debut, and she delivers a dangerous, wickedly clever mystery set in this sort of treacherous, underground, almost magical world where the shadows of magical people are considered a commodity. And so gloamists, who are magicians and who have these magical shadows, will do anything to prevent their shadows from being taken and traded and altered. So to do that, they will often use onyx, which apparently has protective qualities, but the only person who is not harmed by onyx are non-magical people. So what gloamists will do is they will hire these non-magical people to bypass the onyx and steal these magical shadows. So a former gloamist employee and con artist, Charlie Hall, is our protagonist for this story. So Charlie is in a, very boring bartending job that she took for the sake of her stable, sensible boyfriend, Vince. But she's been thinking a lot about the work she used to do and how thrilling it is, and is sort of longing for that sense of adventure in her life. But then she goes in an alley, finds a man dead, finds his shadow kind of torn up, and she gets a lot more than she bargained for, because she goes right back into that treacherous environment and that underworld of shadow trading. And one thing I like about Black's characters is they're kind of they're messy in a very realistic and believable way. And they're also put in this world that, while it's not real, is very engrossing. So it feels very real. And she also includes a lot of twists to kind of keep the suspense up for readers. This is great for fans of other urban fantasy novels like Leigh Bardugo's Ninth House, or V.E. Schwab's Shades of Magic series, or any of V.E. Schwab's books really would fit. And over to Dodie with yet another change in genre.
Yeah, and another really beautiful cover, I think, too. N. Scott Momoday's newest title is Dream Drawings, Poems, Configurations of a Timeless Kind. And this comes out just after the end of National Poetry Month. We're still celebrating National Poetry Month here at Denver Public Library. So this is a great one to put on your to-read list. This new collection comprises 100 sketches or dream drawings, furnishings of the mind, as the author calls them. Influenced by his Native American heritage and its oral storytelling traditions, these are prose poems about nature, animals, warriors, and hunters, as well as meditations that explore themes of love, loss, memory, keeps coming up a lot today, memory. It just showcases his incredible lyrical talent for expressing the connections between nature and art and humanity and emotion. It also includes a selection of black and white drawings, or paintings actually, by Momoday that capture the spirit of his prose. I love this description from Kirkus. They describe this collection as bite-sized snacks for the metaphysical appetite. If you're intrigued by dream drawings, you might also want to pick up Living Nations, Living Words, an anthology of First Peoples poetry. That's a collection with an introduction by Joy Harjo, who is our 23rd US Poet Laureate, or pick up Joe's most recent memoir, Poet Warrior. Ooh, now it's time to get hungry.
Yes, we have a couple cookbooks that we're going to talk about, and I'm very excited for this one because, well, look at that cover, it's so vibrant. But also I kind of knew Rick Martinez as a senior food editor at Bon Appetit, and then he was also in a lot of their test kitchen videos. And it looks like he was also the host of a city guide video series on Mexico City. And this is what Time and Food 52 call one of the most anticipated cookbooks of 2022. So I imagine there's a hold list already, but I would get on that. This is inspired by Martinez's 19-month journey eating his way through Mexico. And he makes sure to highlight the country's most popular regional dishes, but also some of the dishes that are inspired by some of the folks who have immigrated to Mexico, kind of that melting pot culinary culture. And he really takes a practical approach to sourcing his ingredients. So, if there's something that is probably not attainable in your average kind of US grocery store, he proposes some really solid alternatives. But he's also pretty clear to avoid labels of authenticity, he calls, when creating his recipe, although he kind of admits to being complicit in perpetuating those as kind of this very public-facing cook. But I feel like he does a good job making the recipes his own. One standout for me that I'm really looking forward to trying is his Pollo Al Pastor, which is his chicken take on that kind of classic style of cooking. And if you're new to the world of Mexican cooking, he also provides a handy dandy sort of flavor profile chart of the different chilies and helpful cooking tips like browning your rice for a little bit of a nuttier flavor. And he also talks about how to make really good staples like tortillas or rice and beans or a salsa. And everything just looks so mouth-watering. So I'm excited to cook from this. And if you can't get enough of these recipes, or if you are on that long hold list and you want something to satiate you until it arrives, I would try The Food of Oaxaca, Recipes and Stories from Mexico's Culinary Capital by Alejandro Ruiz, or Rick Bayless's Authentic Mexican Regional Cooking from the Heart of Mexico. All right, I'm officially hungry. And this won't help.
Yeah, this is not going to help at all. Many of you might be familiar with Chef Kwame Onawachi from his memoir in 2019, Notes from a Young Black Chef. And in the short time that he entered the culinary area in the United States, he quickly was seen as a rising star, recognized by Food and Wine magazine, Esquire magazine. The James Beard Foundation awarded him an official Rising Star Chef of the Year. So this new book, My America, Recipes from a Young Black Chef, really reflects what he has learned and what he has started to provide in his kitchens. That's a combination of his heritage of being Nigerian, American, and passing through the Caribbean. It really is a global cookbook. It chronicles the ever-changing definition of what is considered Black diaspora cuisine. So that's a kind of constantly moving target, and My America weighs in on that. There are lots of stories interwoven with the recipes about the people that he met in his journey and the kind of food that we eat and why we do eat that. It is a very personal tribute to the food of, in his words, a land that belongs to you and yours and to me and mine. If you're a fan of Marcus Samuelson's and you've read Yes Chef or At the Chinese Table, a memoir by Carolyn Phillips, you will really love this as well. Oh, another graphic novel, yay.
Yes, yeah, this is a graphic memoir, moving on from the food before we get too hungry. It'll look pretty intimidating once you get your copy. It's 900 pages, but they go very quickly, and it's definitely worth your time. So this is set in the summer of 2004. Emma is going to her therapist's office to seek approval for hormone replacement therapy. But her therapist, Toby, is much more concerned with the fact that during their sessions, Emma has come in and presented as 3 different people, complete with different wigs, different costumes, different voices. So he has seen shy, bookish Emma, kind of party girl, overly confident and cocky Katina, and then the middle-aged, depressed workaholic Ed. So those have all come out during their sessions. And so Toby is trying to figure out if Emma has a dissociative identity disorder, if there's something else going on, if she needs help. So that's kind of what's explored in the bulk of this book. And as Emma's troubled past and trauma kind of converge with these different identities. So most of these sessions, or most of the book is set in Toby's office within these sessions, but I feel like Grove's really dynamic illustrations and style, and the way that she gives these characters different personalities, no coincidence intended, really makes them stand out, and again makes the story go by really quickly and really smoothly. So the sessions end up being pretty dynamic rather than plotting or dull. And this is ideal for fans of graphic memoirs in general, but if you've read graphic memoirs by other folks with who have experienced similar kind of themes of identity, like Julia Kay's Super Late Bloomer or Bishak Som's Spellbound. And you kind of want to learn more, this is a great book for that. All right, now we have Siren Queen by Nivo. And you might have read Vo's previous novel, which got a lot of press when it came out. It was a spellbinding kind of Gatsby meets fantasy novel called The Chosen and the Beautiful. So Vo goes back to that sort of magic and a similar time period. This is set in the golden age of pre-code Hollywood in the realm of studio filmmaking. But there's a twist where if an executive knows your real name, they can literally control you. So it starts with a young Chinese American woman who's trying to break into this industry. She works really hard. She works on studio lots. She tries to get in any way she can, but it's only after she blackmails a really predatory and exploitative director that she's finally able to sort of break into the scene. But she doesn't want to use her real name, so she uses her sister's, Luli Wei, as her own. So throughout the book, Luli kind of struggles to break the stereotype of, you know, being the meek, like immigrant outsider. As she begins her career, she stars in monster pictures. She has trysts with her female co-stars. And of course, throughout, she tries to avoid some of the really powerful men who are trying to control her. And along the way, she discovers some of the quite literal horrors, some real, some magical, within her industry. So an easy choice for a read-alike would definitely be her previous novel if you have not read that before. This one is definitely going to be big.
All right, on to a little nonfiction and some joy for the grown-ups or the children in the grown-ups of all of us. This is Forest School for Grown-ups, Explore the Wisdom of the Woods from Richard Irvine. He provides a guide on all basic survival skills, but you can also use this book for a trip to the park. You can learn how to start a fire, forage for food, and there's even interspersed forest mythology in here, which as a mythology geek, I think is really, really fun. According to the book's description, you'll be able to learn how to make a rope swing, go forest bathing, read flowers, build a campfire, and make a forest potion. So I might be running off into the woods this summer to make a potion. It's really useful whether you're a first timer into the woods or an old hand, and the wood or the lino block illustrations are really, really charming and add a lot to it. You can get your whole family involved in exploring nature with Sandy Schwartz's Finding Eco Happiness, Fun Nature Activities to help your kids feel happier and calmer. That's also coming out in May. That's a new book. And the Book Connection, or the Book of Nature Connection, 70 Sensory Activities for All Ages by Jacob Rodenberg, coming out later this month. And we didn't mention this earlier, but when this recording is up, you'll find links to every book that we're mentioning during this book buzz. And if you haven't mentioned the dates on our slides, we're presenting in the order that these books are coming out. So as this recording ages, more of the books will be available in more formats as we add them in print and ebook and audiobook. This next one is yours, Katie.
Is it?
Oh no, this is mine. This is mine. Never mind.
That's okay.
I'm ignoring my own highlighting. This is from a fairly new imprint from Hachette Legacy Lit. You may be familiar with D.L. Watkins from his earlier book, 2016, called The Cook-Up, where he talks about his life really in drugs. And a lot in Watkins' life has changed since 2016. And he documents quite a bit of this in this memoir. He tells how he grew up from being a physically abused Black boy in Baltimore to becoming a violent, wildly successful drug dealer. And then his life changes completely. He reads a book from Sister Solja, and he begins to see a different role in his life, as not being the big man, the big king, or the kingpin, but to be somebody that's to be admired and somebody that can set a good example. This is a coming of age story that you may or may not relate to. I know personally I've never sold a nickel bag on a corner or carried a gun to ensure my survival, but this is really a window into a different life that so many people have survived, and I think we all need to understand what other people's lives are like. While he strives to be a better person, Watkins makes everybody around him a better person as well. For another look at survival and redemption, pick up Survival Map, Notes on an All-American Family by Mitchell Jackson, or Darling Days by E.O. Tillett Wright. This next one, James Lee Burke. If you're a James Lee Burke fan, you're probably hanging on every time you hear that there's a next book coming, waiting for it. This book already has a ton holds on it in our catalog. Burke is now 85 years old and still writing.
Wow.
And yeah, amazing. He's got such a catalog. It's just huge. He continues the Holland family saga in this book when readers find a shattered Aaron Broussard, a novelist whose daughter Fannie Mae has suddenly died. And this mimics a little bit of what has happened in James Lee Burke's own life. He did lose a daughter himself, and many people think this is one of his most autobiographical pieces of fiction. He does, in the book, Aaron tries to honor his daughter's memory by saving two young men from a life of crime amid their opioid-ravaged community. And he gets drawn in with a crazy cast of characters, as often happens in a Burke book. There's a former Klansman, a far from holy roller minister, and a biker club posing as evangelicals, as well as a murderer that's hiding in plain sight. Aaron does have an ally in Ruby Spotted Horse, a no-nonsense woman who harbors some powerful secrets of her own in the Burke world. All of a sudden, the ghost of Fannie Mae shows up, a little bit of magic realism creeping into Burke's work, and her presence works to help Ruby and Aaron find the bad guy, basically. This is also a meditation on loss and loneliness and reconciliation, and I think every James Lee Burke fan is really going to dig this. For more crime with a supernatural twist, try the graphic novel Swine by Tyrone Finch, and yes, pigs are involved, or White Sands by Johan Thorson.
Wow, that cover is certainly sensational. So
it is.
And this one is sensational in a different way. Really love the detail on this one. So this is a historical romance novel written by Adriana Herrera, who has written a lot of, I think, contemporary romance. And this is her first, I believe, historical. And it features, it's set in the year 1889 in Paris. Rum heiress Luz Alana Keith Benzan has just arrived from Santo Domingo to represent her family's business at the exposition happening in town. And she has some high stakes because she's really trying to make it on her own in the business world. But unfortunately, both buyers and sellers will not go into business with a woman, let alone a woman of color. And to make matters worse, if she can't break into the European liquor market and make it on her own, she'll be kind of resorted to only being able to gain control of her trust when she gets married, because it's currently denied to her until then. Enter Scottish exhibitor James Evan Sinclair, Earl of Darnick, who's in a very similar dilemma. He's been told he won't inherit his mother's whiskey distillery unless he gets married. So kind of the marriage of convenience trope at work here. The two of them agree to marry so they can both fulfill the terms of their trust. And after that, they work together to run their business, battle kind of the different predatory figures in their lives who are trying to take over their businesses from them, and along the way fight their growing attraction to each other. I feel like a lot of historical romance, one of the issues that tends to happen is there's a lot of anachronisms, or a lot of contemporary references that pop up. But I think Herrera does a good job of not doing that, and she also really beautifully blends kind of the passion that these characters have with their business acumen and some of the more practical elements. And it's really historically accurate, like I said, and very refreshing to read. For more historical romance by Latinx authors, check out Next Year in Havana by Chantel Cleeton, which kind of alternates between the present day and the 1950s, like a couple of our other books that we've talked about. Or grab the charming classic Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel.
We managed to squeeze in a book that has book in the title.
We're librarians, we have to.
Yeah, we have to do that. I fell in love with Phaedra Patrick's writing when she came out with The Curious Charms of Arthur Pepper. And that same lovely vibe continues in her latest, The Messy Life of Book People. Liv Green forms a tentative friendship with the mega bestselling author who she works for as a house cleaner. And when the author dies, suddenly she is totally shocked when in the will, it asks that Liv complete her final book. As she starts to look for the perfect way to end the Georgia Rory series, which was the last book and what she's writing the last book for, she uncovers the mysteries of Essie's own life, including the fact that Essie had a great love in her life. Was it fulfilled or unfulfilled? You'll have to read the story to find out. This is a wonderful story about following your dreams, gaining confidence, rekindling troubled or maybe just stale marriage, and finding out what you're going to do in the empty nest stage of your life. If you're looking for something that's a bit cozy mystery, a little bit romance, and a lot of charming, this is your next sweet read. If you love the story life of A.J. Fikri by Gabrielle Zevin, or Anne Lyon's The Brilliant Life of Eudora Honeysett, you'll definitely really enjoy Phaedra Patrick's latest book, The Messy Lives of Book People.
Well, speaking of cozy, this is a brand new cozy mystery series. And I don't know about you, but I've been trying to get more into the cozy mystery genre. And my biggest issue is I'll kind of go to the shelf, pick up a book, get excited about it, and then find it's book 7 of 20 in an already established series. So I was thrilled to find a new series where I could kind of start from square one. It's a historical one. It's set in 1923 London, and it follows Saffron Everly, who is a new research assistant at University College London's botany department. And all of her colleagues are men. And of course, they have various misconceptions about the academic abilities or lack thereof of women. So she's really determined to prove them all wrong. But she gets kind of more of a chance than she bargained for when she goes to a dinner with her colleagues, and a professor's wife dies from an unknown toxin that was maybe put into the food or drink. So she has to demonstrate her prowess and find out who the real killer is, because her mentor, Dr. Maxwell, is the main murder suspect. And it's unfortunately because he knows so much about these plants and these various toxins that could come from them. And Saffron is paired up with enigmatic and handsome, of course, researcher Alexander Ashton to prove Dr. Maxwell's innocence and find the real killer. And this has, of course, the sweet sort of romantic elements between Alexander and Saffron. And I think Kate Kavari also lets the twisty mystery unfold really nicely in this sort of setting of academic intrigue. So if that's your thing, or if you've read Rhys Bowen's Her Royal Spinous series or Carrie Greenwood's Phryne Fisher mystery series, grab this one and curl up with a blanket and a cup of hot tea.
Not poisoned.
Hopefully not poisoned, yeah. All right, something a little different from Ottessa Moshfegh. So we try to end these on a cheerful note, but this is a horror novel. So she is best known for her satirical contemporary novel, My Year of Rest and Relaxation, and her kind of unique murder mystery, Death in Her Hands. So she's shifting genres again to a fictional town in medieval Europe called Lapvona. And in this town is 13-year-old Marek, who has a really, innocent, childlike faith in God and sort of the fidelity of family and, good, solid values that every 13-year-old in medieval Europe should have. But he's also seen a lot of corruption. He sees a plague spreading over the land. He sees people going without food. And he witnesses the greed of the town's Lord William, who literally sits on top of a hill, hoards food, and watches people die around him. So eventually, Marek does a good job retaining his faith in humanity and in God, but the corruption comes to a head, and Marek has to decide if it's worth it to keep believing in this. And so Moshfegh imbues her work traditionally with both the imaginary and real sort of grotesque. And she does the same thing here. But again, a starred review from Publishers Weekly describes her depictions of inequality as, quote, uncanny and all too familiar. It's a triumph. So if you like horror, specifically kind of historical horror, like Between Two Lines by Christopher Buhlman or Hollow by B. Catling, I would pick this one up. I don't know if there's a book quite like it, but those two are probably pretty close. All right, and those are all the books we have. Like Dodie said, there will be a handout in the description below, and we'll keep that updated as new book formats come out. Yep, Dodie's got a copy of it. And in-person programming is back at our libraries. Yay! So we have regular programming like story time and Little University for the younger ones, but we've also got our share of events for adults and teens. So go ahead and check out that link, www.denverlibrary.org/events, for the scoop on everything we've got going on. If you're watching this before April 24th, that's the date when the new children's library will be reopening downtown. So make sure to check that out. And thank you so much for watching us. We had a great time putting this list together, and we hope you had a great time watching.
Thank you.